It's easy to get injured today. Very easy. Hey, how you doing? It's not just the workplace, it's everywhere. But one I remember, uh, back in the mid 80s, I was doing some electrical work, hanging some lights in bays over top of machinery and stuff to install a new area. And, I'm up on a high lift in the rafters and shit with the steel, installing these lights. And I'm running my wire and I'm putting these lights in, and I got an air hose there. And I wasn't paying attention, but I had my safety glasses off, blowing this air line through this area to get the dust and stuff out so I could see good. And all of a sudden, realized there was something scraping my eyelid from the inside. It was a stupid mistake, but it doesn't take long. One careless thing in 1 second, and it got so annoying I had to go down off the high lift and leave work and go out to the emergency room at the hospital. And the doctor put some drops in my eyes, and he goes, "Oh yeah, that's a steel chip, lodged in your eye." So I was like, "Oh, okay, great," So he got this microscope thing and some tweezer-looking stuff and removed it, and luckily, I was perfectly fine. Just had to wear a patch on that eye for 3 days or whatever, and after that, everything was fine. Luckily, it didn't mess up my vision or anything else. But as time goes on, you change jobs and you're going to be in dangerous situations. I was working around, when I worked at a power plant, I was working around 13.2 power generation to put on the grid at a cogeneration plant. And you know all the stories with electricity, another big killer of people. But it doesn't even have to be at work. These people who are driving cars and texting, bad move. Because the minute you take your focus off something for a second, you're setting yourself up for a bad scenario. People working at home on ladders and stuff like that. I've known a lot of guys, I didn't quite have the right size ladder, and so I sat it on top of the picnic table or something. No. Get the right equipment and do it the right way. But back to industry. And this story is actually hard to believe, but I worked at a automobile manufacturing plant where they would shear slugs of steel bars. So they would send them through an induction heater. The steel bar would come through, and this shear would come down and cut this steel bar, say it was 1.5 inches in diameter, heat it up and shear this off in like 1.5 inch segments. The operator who was working that machine didn't call maintenance. The machine stopped running, and he knew there was a limit switch inside there that the steel bar is supposed to trigger in order to come down with the shear. So instead of calling the maintenance guy, he moved the steel bar back and put his finger into the opening where the steel bar would be to trigger the limit switch. He triggered it, and the shear came down and cut his finger off. That's not the worst part of this story. So they take him out to the hospital, and at that point they couldn't replace fingers. They weren't able to replace it for whatever reason medically. So a week off of work, he comes back to work. This is the part you're going to find astonishing and very hard to believe. He's back at work. A buddy comes over to his machine. He goes, "Oh, I heard what happened. You ended up getting your finger cut off, and like, how in the hell did that happen, man? What happened? Did the machine mess up or what?" This is even astonishing saying this. He decided to show his buddy what happened. I know where your mind's going. He pulled the bar back and reached in with another finger and said, "It just stopped working, and I knew that limit switch was in there, so I reached in there and triggered the limit switch." And he triggered the limit switch again, and the shear came down. And yes, cut another one of his fingers off. You would think you've got to be a little special to do that again after you did it the week before. He lost 2 fingers in 1 week. One, okay, you can't even understand one, because why would you stick your finger into a machine where you know its job is to cut a 1.5-inch thick steel bar to trigger the limit switch, whose job it is to send the shear down? Okay, all right, I'll give him one time, but to do it again a week later? Astonishing. But those are examples of industry accidents. And that, like I said, that was in the mid-'80s. Today, they wouldn't have given you a chance to cut your second finger off. They probably would have just fired you. Because I know, even within the last year or two, working in this environment of, automation and machinery, I just saw one guy in maintenance who removed the guard from what you would consider a simple conveyor, moving parts along. Removed the guard, though, to do some maintenance, and didn't put the guard back on. Now, that's not acceptable. And today's world, this is in today's world, 3 days later, management fired him for not putting that guard back on. That's how serious it gets today. If you're not using PPE, you're not following procedure, companies today will just flat out fire you. I know a guy who 4 years ago was working on a wrapping machine, and went underneath the machine where the chain drive was with the gears going into the chains running along the gears, and removed the guarding and accidentally triggered the mechanism for it to advance, and his finger got pulled with the chain into the gear and cut his finger off. Once he realized his finger was cut off, from the pain and the blood, he got out from under a piece of equipment, found his finger, off to the hospital he goes. They also couldn't replace it. I guess it was too mangled or something. Sometimes they can replace fingers, sometimes they can't. Maybe it's 50-50. I'm not sure. But got himself bandaged up and fixed enough that he could return to work. So let's say it took him 2 or 3 hours to do that. He showed back up to work, and immediately when he showed back up, and this was like 4 years ago, once he showed back up, they said to him, don't come on this property, go back to your house for at least 3 days, because they were going to flat out fire him. Because if you violate the company's procedures and you remove guarding, or you're working on energized equipment, and I know everybody's familiar with that term, you're setting yourself up that if something happens, you could easily be fired. Now, that's the company's stance today. Of course, OSHA is huge today, and companies are trying very hard not to get into lawsuits and everything else to protect themselves, and maybe at the same time partially protecting the employees, because in today's world, you don't want to be removing guarding and working on energized equipment. Number one, though, I don't want people getting hurt. And that's why I say it only takes a second. Pay attention to what you're doing. Don't take unnecessary risks. Wear protective equipment, which is why I still have 10 of my fingers, because I know guys who, even at home with circular saws, end up losing fingers. Be very careful. Always pay attention to what you're doing. Take care of yourself. And until the next time, I'll see you later.